want to welcome to the Straight Red Card, the one and only, the master of disaster, big soccer writer extraordinaire, Dan Loney. Welcome back to the show, Dan. I guess it's been a few months, and congrats on the new member of the family as well.
Thank you very much. It turns out they're easy to make and fun, too.
Well, that's the good part.
We're very happy about that. And if you want to talk for a half hour about how wonderful my kids are, then I am perfectly willing to do that.
I'm not sure that people want to hear about that, but, you know, there might be...
I get that a lot, and I don't understand it because they are the best kids in the world. You think people would be interested, but I get a lot of pushback on that.
Absolutely.
So, is there any soccer news? I've been anything important? I know the Rapids won something. That's got to be the biggest story of the year. The re-entry draft, of course. That's much bigger than...
Well, that was pretty hot. I have to admit, I was all hot and steamy about that. But let's start with a topic that perhaps irritates all of us more than any other. And our mutual friend, Mr. Stan Collins, he wrote a piece on Big Soccer recently.
Yeah, it was very good.
It was, and he asked the question about the 2018, the 2022 World Cup bidding process, whether or not our rep, Mr. Chuck Santa Claus Blazer, really got it. Did he get it? And he seems to imply that they were voting for the weaker bids because, as he puts it, weaker is stronger, i.e. it seems that FIFA voted for these relatively weaker bids to build their own legacy, if you will, by growing the sport in emerging economies. You had a chance to rap with Mr. Blazer yourself, so what are your impressions of Stan Collins' thoughts?
I like style. I don't know him personally. I like reading him, so I hesitate before disagreeing with him to this extreme, but that doesn't hold up. Mm-hmm. The emerging markets argument doesn't hold up, and the developing economies argument doesn't hold up. Mm-hmm. It's simply, and I tried to go into this in my own boring blog, but what FIFA has done, they made worse decisions, picked less profitable tournaments for a reason. The only reason I can come up with was for the representatives' personal enrichment. That's why you have two bids at the same time, and that's why you pick two weaker ones. Mm-hmm. And we can go into a very boring argument about both the Russian economy and the Qatari economy. Mm-hmm. Where is the Qatar economy going to go? It is built on one resource, and that's pretty much maxed out. They're not going to get any richer.
Right.
Certainly as far as soccer is concerned, they are never going to be a world power. Mm-hmm. I made the joke that their population is 1/3 the size of the 94 paid attendants. That isn't even fair. Their actual population is 200,000. The rest are guest workers. Mm-hmm. The idea that we're going to build a Qatari Super League out of that's going to, even if they united with the rest of the Persian Gulf, they've been trying to be regional powers for a while and have been failing miserably. There is nowhere to go. That is not a developing market. That argument just flops. And with Russia, that's already. What are you going to do with Russia that you haven't done for the past 75 years? They've had a lot of chances. They won their European Cup. Basically, everything FIFA has tried to justify is wrong. I think that's a good rule of thumb in any case.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hold water. If you want to develop a market, develop the United States. That'll make you a lot richer, a lot more quickly.
But Dan, they don't want to. They don't want to develop the United States. FIFA isn't interested in developing American soccer and getting it any bigger than it is because for them, they don't necessarily see that as good for the world game in general. I mean, let's just look at online. If you're ever posting with Europeans or folks that live abroad, they don't like us much. And imagine if all of a sudden the United States became a world soccer power. That wouldn't help the sport in their eyes.
You're confusing FIFA with fans. If it was about fans, then it would have been in England. And if not in England, then in Spain. This is a business. This is a cartel. This is, in its own way, as much of an multinational resource company as anything in Qatar. It has nothing to do with fans. It has to do with building the business. And that's why Blatter is talking about China and India in the same breath as Qatar, even though any world economist will probably laugh in the face about that. Those are honestly developing markets, and if they put a World Cup there out of the blue, that would have been more understandable than putting it into one tiny little Persian Gulf country. Yep. As far as the United States goes, you have this enormous well, we all know that. I don't need to lecture on what they're turning down. But from a business point of view, not exploiting this growing market that has been growing steadily since 1990, and this World Cup would have pushed it over, at least in my opinion.
There's a big difference.
For FIFA to turn that down just because message board posters call us Yank and tell us to call it football, that's a lot more romantic than I think FIFA's executive committee gets.
The rumor is it's no longer going to be in one market. It's not just going to be in Qatar. There's talk of having games all around the Middle East.
I read that, and two things about that. First of all, if that was the bid, that would have been a good idea. You include the Emirates, you have a much bigger population, they're just as rich, you have more stadiums, you have a truly regional world, and it's reasonably stable, unlike across the Persian Gulf. That would have been much more palatable, but that wasn't what was voted on. The other bigger problem is that Sepp Blatter just talks. He was the one who said that the women were going to wear skin-tight uniforms to promote the game. He's just in front of the microphone too often.
Right. Well, here's the thing, Dan. I just wanted to cut in because I think the market in England is pretty much tapped out. The market in the United States for soccer is gigantic. It still has all kinds of potential. So my thought is that the reason that we got left out, certainly because our potential is much greater than the whole Middle East. If you want to sell T-shirts, or if you want to sell balls, or if you want to sell the World Cup, or you want to sell the world's game, there is a reason we were left out. And maybe this sounds conspiratorial, but in the end, to me, I really don't think FIFA is interested, in the end, outside of this basic rudimentary level we've achieved so far. They don't want to see the United. Maybe this is too conspiratorial, but in the end, I don't think they want us to get any further than we are right now, because it's not good for the game, in their eyes.
Neither is China. If you want to have the future of the game in some of these repressive regimes, and I realize I'm getting a little political here, but you don't want to go in the direction they're going. You don't want to develop the game in Africa. You don't want to develop the game in China without a lot of political change that even FIFA can't get through.
But those countries have a long ways to go, Dan, to even, lucky if they qualify. I'm talking about the United States is on the verge by 2022 of making something happen if we have home court.
No, I sort of see the fear that you don't want another, I guess either on a sporting level, you don't want other new countries to win it, but we've had, Spain has won, France has won in recent memory. I realize that's part of the European old guard.
Yeah.
But the idea of just that sort of fear, I think from a business point of view, that gets trumped by the potential audience, the potential corporate sponsorship based in the United States. This seems a lot more like people getting their news from, I hate to make it political, but it's the sort of thing that comes from the Bush administration and the way we think the world saw us during the past decade.
Yep.
I don't think 24 highly paid, and 22 were left off. While all this is true, and a lot of this may be what is seen generally from fans and even coaches and even leagues, I don't think the businessmen of FIFA need to be taking that into account. If they did, that doesn't wash with me. It sounds more like the joke I used in my blog. I hate to recycle, but it's not a Santa Cruz sociology class. These are not Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. These are powerful capitalists.
Yes.
And they are not going to make decisions based on.
I would,
at least I thought.
at least I would love to agree with you on that, but I do seem to feel, and Brett and I have, of course, endured the brunt of some pretty nasty comments from Middle Eastern folks over the last week. There were some negative feelings about.
Now, if this were, but if that was their motivation, give it to Egypt, give it to Morocco,
I
give
agree.
it to, well, Saudi Arabia is its own comedy right there. But as far as, at least Saudi Arabia has qualified for a World Cup before.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're going to say that it's a politically motivated because the U.S. is bad and they're afraid of us, great. There were other bids. Give it to Australia.
Yeah.
Or encourage encourage the Persian Gulf bid, or encourage a larger country in the Muslim world to go forward. Don't just. The reason you have Qatar do it by itself is because Qatar didn't want to share, and they. I have no evidence of bribery, but what are they going to do? Sue me for saying they took bribes? I'll just point them to the BBC.
It smells
But
bad,
I
though.
can't-
Yeah.
Well, and this is the other thing. You have these two bids that will now have reserve the World Cup for the next 12 years. That sounds like guys cashing out. That sounds like old men who are trying to squeeze their last bit of income from their gigs. And I would anticipate a lot of these guys leaving those positions and retiring.
Yeah.
And now, what does FIFA have to give? Here's your Confederations Cup. Here's your World Club Cup. Here's your Youth Cup. It sounded like guys going for a payday. And that's why you pick Russia over all the other bids. That's why you pick the worst bids.
Yeah, none of us here have anything against Qatar or any Middle Eastern country. In fact, as you've mentioned, there are other Middle Eastern countries, had they bid, that would have been suitable because at least they have some sort of World Cup pedigree. This isn't an argument against Middle Eastern people or the Middle East in general. In fact, I would have been happy to lose to Australia. I would have been happy to lose to somebody else in the Middle East, as you mentioned, Egypt, who has some sort of World Cup pedigree. But that's not
absolutely.
the case.
No, that's the reason. You can't say we're going to develop the game and then pick the place where there's no potential for development.
Right.
And as far as, if you're saying that about Russia, then that's a fool's errand because the game's been in Russia for 75 years or whatever. I mean,
Right.
It was a big part of the old regime, the Soviet regime. What are you trying to develop at this point?
Right.
I mean, if that's the case, why ever have it in Europe again? If you really, why go to Brazil?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, if you really, who's not a soccer fan in Brazil right now?
Right.
I mean, are they really hoping 2014 will win the last guy over? The one guy watching Formula One who hates the game.
Yeah.
They're gonna go to that guy's house. Hey, just give this game a chance. It's one of these things where they're very good. FIFA's very good at coming up with things that sound good and sound palatable. The top of that list is calling the English bad losers because they are. There's no way to.
But maybe they should be. Yeah.
That's the point. I mean, they've been bad losers about stuff before, and now when they really have something to complain about, and they should be, if anything, even more infuriated than American fans are.
Yeah.
Because that was the one bid that was probably as good or better than ours.
Yeah. Well,
About the Australia bid, the one big quote that struck me was they said the one downfall to our bid is that we played cleanly.
And that's one of these things where I have no problem winning if we had played dirty, but I thought we had people who knew to play dirty.
so did I. Yeah.
What else is Jack Warner for? We have
Maybe we should just maybe we should cut out on this. I think we covered it. I think we did a good job. I think we were fair.
No, I think the three of us, a few more minutes, we'll have this solved.
I wish we could, Dan.